The reason you can't control yourself isn't weakness. It isn't laziness. It isn't a character flaw you were born with and can't change. It's because you are not one mind. You never were. Think about the last time you acted against your own best judgment. You knew you shouldn't. Some part of you was watching clearly, saying, "This is not what you want to do. This is not who you want to be." And you did it anyway. You ate the thing you said you wouldn't eat. You sent the message you knew you'd regret. You stayed when you'd decided to leave, or left when everything in you said stay. You chose the short relief over the long reward again, even though you've made that trade before and watched it cost you. And afterward, that specific feeling. Not just regret, something closer to confusion. Why did I do that? Not rhetorical. Genuinely asking. Because the person who made that choice doesn't feel entirely like you. It feels like someone else got into the driver's seat for a moment, made a decision, and left you to deal with the consequences. Plato had a name for that experience. He called it the divided soul, and 2,400 years ago, he mapped it with a precision that modern psychology is still catching up to. Here is what Plato proposed in a work called The Republic. The human soul, the psyche, the self, whatever you want to call the thing that makes you you, is not a single unified entity. It is three, not three personalities, not three separate people living inside you, three distinct sources of motivation, each with its own logic, its own desires, its own definition of what you should do right now. He called them the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive. And he said that virtually every conflict you experience in life, every moment of self-sabotage, every contradiction between who you say you are and what you actually do, every internal war between what you want and what you want more, comes from these three parts pulling in different directions. You don't have a discipline problem. You have an alignment problem. Let's start with the part you probably think of as yourself. The rational soul. This is the part that plans. The part that sets the alarm for 6 a.m. and means it. The part that calculates long-term consequences, weighs options, makes commitments, writes lists. The part that knows, with perfect clarity, what the right thing to do is. The rational soul is the one reading this right now, following the argument, nodding along. It is also, Plato noticed, the weakest of the three, not because reason is unimportant, but because reason is slow, deliberate. It requires conditions, quiet, time, space, that the other two parts of the soul don't wait for. The rational soul is the part of you that makes excellent decisions at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It is much less powerful at midnight when you're tired, and the other two parts have been pushing for hours. The second part is the one most people don't have a name for. Plato called it the spirited soul. The Greek word was thumos. This is not emotion in the general sense. It's something more specific. Thumos is the part of you that burns. It's the source of your pride, your sense of honor, the voice that says, "I will not be disrespected," the heat that rises in your chest when someone underestimates you, the stubbornness that makes you refuse to quit something even when quitting would be rational, the rage that appears when you witness injustice, the drive for recognition, for status, for being seen and acknowledged as someone who matters. Thumos is why you can't let go of an argument even when you know you're wrong. Thumos is why you work yourself past exhaustion on something you care about. Thumos is why insults land harder than praise, and why being ignored can hurt more than being attacked. It is simultaneously the most dangerous part of you and the most necessary. Without it, you have no fire, no will to fight for what matters, no courage. With too much of it, unguided, you burn down things that deserve to stand. The third part is the oldest, the appetitive soul. This is the part that wants, purely, simply, immediately. Food, sex, warmth, pleasure, comfort, relief from discomfort, the end of tension, the satisfaction of hunger in whatever form hunger takes. The appetitive soul doesn't plan. It doesn't care about your 5-year goals or your self-image or what you told yourself you were going to do this week. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. Plato described it as the largest part of the soul, the one that, if left unchecked, will expand to fill everything. It is boundless in a way the other two are not. Reason reaches toward specific truths. Thumos seeks specific forms of recognition. Appetite has no natural limit. It satisfies briefly, and then it wants again. This is the part that reaches for the phone before you've decided to. That redirects you toward comfort, when discomfort was the path you needed. That turns one drink into 3, 1 hour of distraction into an evening, one compromise into a pattern. It is not evil. Plato was careful about this. Appetite is necessary. It keeps the body alive. It generates the energy that the other parts direct. Without it, there is no life. But it is ungoverned by nature. That's the problem. Now here's where it gets personal. Every internal conflict you have ever experienced maps onto this structure. You set an intention, rational soul, clear, considered, genuinely meant. Then something triggers your spirited soul. Someone questions your ability. Your ego rises. Your focus shifts from the goal to the threat. You start making decisions to defend your status rather than advance your purpose. You argue when you should listen. You prove instead of progress. Or appetite stirs. Fatigue, boredom, stress. And suddenly the thing you wanted an hour ago feels abstract and distant, while the thing in front of you feels immediate and real. The goal recedes. The relief advances. And reason watches this happen, clearly seeing what's occurring, unable to stop it, because knowing what you should do and being able to do it are completely different capacities. You knew. You did it anyway. Not because you're broken. Because rational knowing is not the same as integrated action, and Plato was the first person to say so clearly. He had an image for this: the charioteer and 2 horses. The charioteer is reason. The noble horse is Thumos, spirited, proud, responsive to guidance when treated with respect. The unruly horse is appetite, powerful, essential, pulling constantly toward immediate satisfaction. The charioteer's task is not to destroy either horse. It is to drive them, to direct the noble horse toward worthy goals, to rein the unruly horse without breaking it, because its power is what moves the whole chariot. The driver, who ignores the horses, gets thrown. The driver who is enslaved by them goes nowhere meaningful. Only when reason genuinely leads, when Thumos is directed toward something worthy and appetite is acknowledged rather than suppressed or indulged, does the soul move as it was designed to. Plato called this justice, not a social concept but a personal one, the soul in right order, each part doing what it's actually for. Watch how this plays out in the patterns people can't break. The person who keeps undermining their own success, the rational soul genuinely wants to succeed. The plan is sound. The capability is real. But Thumos carries an old wound, some early experience of being seen and punished for it, or trying and failing publicly. And so every time success approaches, Thumos engineers a retreat, not out of laziness, out of a fear of exposure that feels like self-protection. Reason says, keep going. Thumos says, they'll see you. They'll judge you. Pull back. And appetite provides the mechanism, the distraction, the procrastination, the reliable escape into something that feels good now. 3 parts, all moving. None of them is the real you. All of them are you, or the person who keeps choosing the wrong relationships. The rational soul knows, with clarity, the pattern, has analyzed it, has promised to break it. But appetite wants connection, warmth, the relief of being wanted. It doesn't care about the pattern. It cares about right now. And Thumos wants to be chosen, seen, confirmed as worthy. When someone offers that, even someone whose presence will ultimately cost more than they give, appetite and Thumos vote together. Reason is outvoted, not because reason is wrong, because in that moment, 2 parts of the soul want the same thing and 1 part wants something different. The majority wins, not through logic, but through sheer motivational weight. And afterward, the analysis, the familiar confusion. I knew better. You did know better. A different part of you wanted something else more. Plato's insight has a modern echo that might surprise you. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Walter Mischel sat children in front of a marshmallow. He told them, "You can eat this now, or if you wait 15 minutes, you'll get two." Then he left the room. Some children ate immediately. Some waited. Some started to wait, failed, and ate anyway. Some developed elaborate strategies, turning away from the marshmallow, singing to themselves, covering their eyes. The ones who succeeded weren't the ones who wanted the marshmallow less. They were the ones who managed their attention differently. They redirected. They created distance between the impulse and the action. They bought reason time. Plato didn't know about marshmallows, but he described the exact same mechanism. The soul that can act well is not the soul that has eliminated desire. It's the soul that has learned to govern it, not suppression, direction. The difference between the person who eats the marshmallow and the one who waits is not willpower in the simple sense. It is alignment. Here's what misalignment actually costs. Not just the obvious failures, not just the times you acted against your values and paid the immediate price. The subtler cost is identity fragmentation. When the three parts of your soul are consistently working against each other, you lose coherence. You become genuinely uncertain about who you are, because the answer keeps changing depending on which part has momentum. In the morning, when reason is fresh, you're one person. By evening, when appetite has been denied all day and Thumos has taken hits from the world, you're someone else. You make promises that the evening version of you won't keep. You set standards that the tired version of you can't meet. And slowly, the gap between who you say you are and how you actually behave widens into something that feels like shame. Plato called the soul in disorder unjust, not morally, necessarily, but structurally, a self at war with itself. And the consequence of living in that war over years is not just poor decisions, it's the erosion of self-trust. So what does alignment actually look like? Plato was precise about this. The well-ordered soul is not the soul that has silenced desire or ego. It is the soul where each part is doing what it's genuinely for. Appetite, directed toward what actually nourishes, not suppressed, but educated, taught to want better things, or to want good things in proportion. A body that is fed, rested, cared for, not indulged into numbness, not denied into rebellion. Thumos, directed toward genuinely worthy goals, not toward ego protection or status performance, but towards something that deserves the fire. The pride that comes from doing difficult things well. The anger that responds to real injustice rather than imagined slights. The drive that serves the work rather than demanding the work serve the image. Reason, actually in charge, not just observing, not just planning in the abstract, but genuinely directing. This requires the other two parts to trust it, and they only trust it when it proves trustworthy. When it makes commitments, it keeps. When it doesn't pretend the other parts don't exist. When it acknowledges desire and emotion honestly, works with them rather than dismissing them. The charioteer who ignores his horses crashes. The charioteer who respects them, understands them, and directs them with both firmness and skill. That one goes somewhere. Here is what that practice actually looks like on an ordinary day, not in theory, not in the ideal conditions where reason is fresh and the other two parts are cooperative. In the real conditions, tired, distracted, under pressure, when the gap between who you intend to be and what you're about to do is opening up in real time. The first skill is recognition. Before you can govern the three parts, you have to be able to identify which one is speaking. And this is harder than it sounds because each part is fluent in the language of the others. Appetite doesn't announce itself as appetite. It arrives dressed as logic. I deserve this. I've worked hard. This is a reasonable exception. Thumos doesn't announce itself as ego. It arrives dressed as principle. This isn't about pride. This is about doing what's right. Learning to hear the difference is the foundational work. A useful practice. When you feel the pull toward a decision, especially one that conflicts with something you've already committed to, pause long enough to ask one question. Which part of me wants this? Not to judge the answer, just to know it. If it's appetite, the wanting will feel urgent and immediate. It will be focused on relief, on comfort, on the resolution of a current tension. It will be less interested in what comes after. If it's thumos, the wanting will have heat in it. It will be tied to how you are being seen, or how you see yourself. There will be something at stake beyond the immediate outcome. Reputation, dignity, the story you tell about who you are. If it's reason, the wanting will feel quieter, less urgent. It will be able to wait. It will still be present tomorrow and next week and after the tension has passed. You don't need to act on this distinction immediately. Just knowing which part is driving changes your relationship to the impulse. The moment you can observe it, you are slightly outside it, and slightly outside is enough to choose. The second skill is negotiation, not suppression. This is where most approaches to self-improvement fail. They treat the unruly parts of the soul as enemies to be defeated, eliminate desire, override emotion, pure discipline, pure willpower, pure reason. It doesn't work, not sustainably, because appetite and thumos don't disappear when you ignore them. They accumulate, they wait, and when reason is weakened by fatigue, by stress, by the ordinary erosion of a difficult day, they don't come back gently. The soul doesn't respond to suppression. It responds to acknowledgement. When appetite rises, the move is not to pretend it isn't there. It's to address it directly, internally, honestly. I know you're tired. I know you want relief. We're going to do this thing first, and then we will rest. I'm not forgetting you. It sounds strange to speak to yourself this way, but what you're actually doing is integrating. You're not splitting off the inconvenient part and fighting it. You're including it in the decision, giving it a seat at the table, while making clear that it doesn't hold the casting vote. Thumos requires something slightly different. It doesn't need comfort. It needs direction. It needs to feel that the effort it's being asked to make is worthy, that the goal deserves the fire. This is why people with strong thumos can endure enormous difficulty when they believe in what they're doing, and collapse almost instantly when they lose that belief. The noble horse runs hard for a worthy destination. It stops dead for one that doesn't deserve it. So the negotiation with thumos isn't calm down. It's here is why this matters, not a performance of motivation, a genuine reckoning with whether what you're pursuing actually deserves your pride. If it does, thumos becomes your greatest asset. If it doesn't, no amount of discipline will compensate for a soul that knows, at the level of fire, that the direction is wrong. The third skill is recovery, not perfection. You will lose the reins. Every person who has ever tried to live with intention has experienced the moment where appetite or thumos takes over completely, where the decision is made before reason had a chance to weigh in, where you look back an hour later and barely recognize the person who made that choice. Plato didn't describe the well-ordered soul as one that never falls into disorder. He described it as one that returns to order. The length of the recovery is what changes with practice, not the falling. The falling is human, structural, inevitable. But the time between falling and returning, the speed with which reason reorients, the grace with which it resumes its place without excessive self-punishment or elaborate justification. Self-punishment is thumos misapplied, ego turned inward, burning the self for the crime of being human. Elaborate justification is appetite and thumos collaborating to protect themselves from accountability. Neither is recovery. Recovery is simple, and it is humble. That was the unruly horse. I see what happened. We're continuing, and then continuing. That trust is built slowly. Every time you make a commitment and keep it, to yourself, privately when no one is watching, thumos notices. The noble horse responds to demonstrated integrity. It will pull for you when you've shown it that the direction is worth pulling toward. Every time you acknowledge what appetite wants, without simply surrendering to it. When you say, I see you, I know you're there, and we're going to do this first. Appetite learns it will be addressed. It doesn't need to hijack the wheel because it trusts it won't be forgotten. And slowly, the three parts begin to move together. Not perfectly, not permanently, but in the same direction more often, for longer, with less internal war. That's alignment. That's what Plato called the just soul. Here is the practical question Plato is asking you. Not, how do I become more disciplined? That's the wrong frame. Discipline applied to a misaligned soul is just suppression. It works until it doesn't. And when it fails, it tends to fail completely. The right question is, which part of me is actually running things right now? And is that appropriate for this situation? Because each part has its domain. Appetite should run things when you're deciding what to eat, when to sleep, what physical pleasure is worth pursuing. It has genuine wisdom about the body. The problem is when it runs things in decisions that require long-term thinking. Thumos should run things when courage is required, when you need to hold a line or fight for something that matters or maintain dignity under pressure. The problem is when it runs things in moments that require humility or revision. Reason should run things when you're choosing direction, making commitments, evaluating what's actually true. The problem is when it tries to govern moments that require presence rather than analysis. Misalignment is often just the wrong part driving at the wrong time. You have already felt what alignment is like. You have had moments, maybe brief ones, maybe rare, where everything inside you was moving in the same direction, where you weren't fighting yourself, where what you wanted, what you felt, and what you knew were all pointing the same way. Athletes call it flow. Mystics call it grace. Plato called it the soul in its proper order. It is not a permanent state. It is a direction. And the reason it feels so significant when it happens, the reason those moments stand out in memory as something close to what life is supposed to feel like, is because the soul recognizes its own right order when it briefly achieves it. That recognition is the same impulse as the feeling of something missing. Both are the soul reporting accurately on itself. One says, I am not in order. The other says, this is what order feels like. The divided soul is not a flaw in the design. Plato was clear about this. The three parts are not a mistake, not evidence of corruption, not something to be transcended or eliminated. They are the structure of a complete human being. You need appetite to be alive, to be embodied, to be present in the physical world. You need Thumos to care, to fight, to have the fire that makes sustained effort possible. You need reason to direct it all, to be the part that chooses the destination and holds the course. The problem was never having these parts. The problem is the order of authority between them. When appetite leads, you live for relief. Every decision bends toward comfort. The horizon shrinks to what feels good now. When Thumos leads, you live for recognition. Every decision bends toward being seen, validated, confirmed. The horizon extends, but only to the boundaries of what others think of you. When reason leads, genuinely leads, with the other parts honored rather than suppressed, you live for something that doesn't depend on mood or approval, or the accidents of sensation. You live from the inside out. This is what Plato meant by knowing yourself. Not self-analysis as an intellectual exercise, not the accumulation of accurate beliefs about your personality, but the lived, practiced, ongoing discipline of understanding which part of you is speaking at any given moment, and whether it should be in charge right now. Am I reasoning or rationalizing? Rationalization is appetite or Thumos generating a conclusion, then handing it to reason to dress in the language of logic. The conclusion came first. The argument came second. You know the difference from the inside. Rationalization has a faint smell of untruth, a slight texture of performance. You're not convincing yourself. You're covering yourself. Am I feeling this, or am I being this? There is a difference between an emotion that moves through you and an emotion that becomes you. Thumos, when it takes over completely, stops being something you experience and becomes something you are. You stop having the anger. You become it. You stop having the pride. You perform it. The soul in right order feels everything. It is governed by none of it. 2,500 years after Plato wrote the Republic, we built imaging technology that lets us watch the brain in real time, and what we found maps, with uncomfortable precision, onto his three parts: the prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning, deliberation, long-term judgment. Reason, the limbic system, emotional response, social threat detection, status sensitivity. Thumos, the brainstem and reward circuitry, drive, appetite, immediate satisfaction. Appetite. These systems don't always agree. They have different timescales, different priorities, different definitions of what matters right now. And the prefrontal cortex, reason, is literally the last to develop and the first to go offline under stress, fatigue, or emotional activation. Plato didn't have an fMRI machine. He had something rarer, the ability to watch himself think, and to describe what he saw with enough precision that it remained true for 2.5 millennia. You are not broken. You are not one mind that keeps failing. You are 3 sources of motivation that were never fully introduced to each other, pulling in directions that were never clearly negotiated, in a life that mostly rewarded whichever part was loudest at any given moment. The reason you can't control yourself is not weakness. It's that you've been trying to drive the chariot by arguing with the horses. The horses don't respond to argument. They respond to relationship, to consistency, to a driver who shows up every day, who knows their nature, who works with what they are, rather than demanding they be something else. Reason doesn't win by overpowering appetite and thumos. It wins by being the part they both agree to follow. The person you are trying to become is not a different person. It is a more ordered version of the one you already are. The reason you have is sufficient. The thumos you have is sufficient. The appetite you have is part of what makes you alive. The question is not how to become someone else. The question is how to introduce these 3 parts of yourself, honestly, carefully, without pretending any of them away, and ask them to move in the same direction, not one mind overcoming 2 obstacles. 3 parts of one soul, finally working together. That's not a small thing. That's what Plato meant by becoming whole.